Welcome, everybody, to the Brian Foltis Behavioral Finance Podcast. My name is Dr. Brian Foltis, and I am an associate professor of finance at Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana. And my goal is to teach you about behavioral finance in order for you to make better decisions with your life and with your money. Today's topic is on heuristics and biases, continuing our conversation from the previous podcast. Those keeping score at home, the previous one was number 8, and this is podcast number 9. And we are continuing to outline the fundamentals and basics of behavioral finance. This is the section where we are talking about biases and heuristics, and we're going to give the general outline. That's what we've been talking about today. And then we come full circle talking about how these biases and heuristics can affect, both in good ways and mostly bad ways, our financial decision making. So thanks for everybody for watching today or listening wherever you are, working on podcasts and videos, so everybody can have options on how you want to learn about behavioral finance. So if you haven't already, please make sure you like and subscribe so you can follow and continue to learn more. If you are listening on the podcast, would love some good feedback from you. And please spread the word about behavioral finance and how we can help each other make better decisions and let this thing grow. And let's learn. So today, we are hopping straight into the content. We're piggybacking on the conversation that we were talking about before, which is our type 1 and type 2 ways of thinking. So type 1 is our automatic thought process that kind of puts us on cruise control. It's that type 1 thinking that before you even wake up, you kind of realize that you've done all these different, you've gone to the bathroom, you've washed your hands, brushed your teeth maybe. I don't brush my teeth right away. I have my coffee first, and I brush my teeth. Then I told you about my deodorant, all these things that are automatic, going down the road, not even knowing where we are. That's type 1 thinking. Type 2 is where we have to jump in and really override that instinctual type 1. Say, no. Either we have to buckle down and do some actual concentration, or you're going in the wrong direction, and now I have to step in and say, okay, well, I'm actually not going down this way or going on my way to work. I'm not actually going to work. I'm actually going in that direction, but I'm going to a restaurant instead. I have to step in and make that change. So anyway, we're going to learn more about that today. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and we've been talking about, these are called like self-preservation. So a lot of the type 1 is all about keeping you alive and preserving you. And that's what leads us to this ambiguity aversion. And so a couple other things that we have. This status quo bias is something that we tend to leave things as they are. And so think about, you set something up, or you started a free trial somewhere, and you said, oh yeah, in 7 days I'll remember to cancel it because I don't want it the whole time. And then you go into your bank statement and you realize, okay, what the hell was this? What was $49? What is this transaction? Surely I've been hacked. And then you realize it was that free trial that is expired and is now nicking you every month for $49.99. I had that recently happen where Spirit Airlines, the trailer park in the sky, they, of course, I love a good deal. So I always get roped in, and only recently when they left my fiance and I stranded in Fort Myers with no way out for another week did I ever say, I'm done. We're breaking up. This relationship is not healthy. And the best we could do was rent a car, drive up to Tampa, spend the night, and take a flight from Tampa to Indianapolis the next day. on our own dime to do all of that. And once I realized that was the backup plan, if anything got canceled or delayed, then I realized that my relationship with Spirit Airlines is done. But I was on their Saver Flyer plan, and they recently, instead of, my breakup being a full breakup, I didn't realize that their Saver plan or whatever was reoccurring every year. So when I looked up just a couple of months ago, Spirit had dinged me for $69.95, something like that. And I thought, I need to get out of this right away. And so I had like 2 or 3 different emails attached to it, and trying to figure out which one this one was attached to. It was an ordeal, but I really had to get out of that that bad relationship once and for all. So we leave things the way they are, and we tend to forget about it. And this is just our type 1 thinking, saving us mental energy, and not really important to us, and we're going to forget. We're kind of more in the now, and marketers know that, and they say, no, just take a free trial. You'll do it for free. And we know you're going to forget, and I'll forget, and we have to. So best case scenario around this is set a reminder for you to cancel this before it is. Put it on my phone. Ding. What is that? Oh, yeah. Well, I just saved, anywhere from $10 to $100, depending on your subscription, sending that reminder to you for that free trial. And I know I just started, I'm a on-again, off-again relationship with Apple TV, but since Ted Lasso came out with season 3 a while ago and haven't watched it, I'm turning that subscription back on and leave it on until I'm done. But then I have to remember to go in and change it. But our status quo is this can be really dangerous, not only from a trial or subscription standpoint, but with our investments. We have a real tendency to set it and leave it alone. And so later on, we're going to talk about some of those repercussions on not changing your asset allocation or your portfolio, how that can morph into, even if it started out reasonable, how it can grow into a bad, disproportionate allocation over time. Next thing is called the endowment effect. So the endowment effect, what you have or you own seems better than what you don't have or don't own. And so I always do in class, I'll always pick on somebody, and usually, we all have their water bottles here. So we've got our water bottle, and I'll pick somebody out and say, hey, that's a really nice water bottle. Can I use this? And hopefully they say, yeah. I said, okay, what I want you to do is we can even use this water bottle. It's fine. Me, the owner, I'm going to give my lowest price that I am willing to receive in order to give up this water bottle. And everybody listening or watching needs to think about their highest price they would be willing to pay in order for this to for them to buy it from me. And I'll wash it, we'll sanitize it. I get that. It will be nice and clean here. For the viewers that are listening on the podcast, I've got a nice, it's Embrava Sport water bottle, and it's about 48 ounces. It's still a decent tact. I'm not going to open it because it might be pretty gross. I got to wash it, but nevertheless, here it is. I don't remember where I got it. Probably didn't pay too much, but sometimes if Mandy buys, she's the fancy one out of the two. Fancy Mandy. And she'll sometimes spend a little bit more. So if she gave that to me as a gift, then it could be a pretty decent price. Well, so I've got my number. Post your number, and typically if I find somebody's nice coffee thing or water bottle, the Butler students, they're doing pretty well, or their family's doing well, so I can find a pretty decent one they're not going to let their stuff go for less than $40 or $50. And for good, I guess if it's nice. I don't think I've ever paid $40 or $50 for a coffee mug or a water bottle. But they're out there, and they're willing to really not give it up for any less than $40 or $50. Meanwhile, you can expect that nobody who doesn't own this thing is going to be willing to pay that amount. And in fact, the pricing that people are willing to pay is typically around $5 or $10. So we're in just completely different worlds. And it just outlines this endowment effect. What we own, we tend to give extra value to it. And sometimes it's sentimental, and sometimes it's just unnecessary value added to it. And when we don't own it, we kind of undermine it or undervalue it. So I have a tough time here. I've told you in the last episode about my trading cards and my basketball cards. And so I have here they are. Here's I just grabbed a random stack. I got to get them sent in for grading. And I'm looking at these, and when I am looking to buy, so when I don't own a particular card and I'm looking to buy, I can always find the flaws in them. And I go, oh, well, that's a dinged, or the centering on it isn't very good. And I can kind of justify why I'm not willing to pay only, so much for this particular card. But then when I own it, I look at it and go, oh, yeah, send this in. This is a 10. This is a 9 or 10 easy all day. And as soon as I really overvalue this thing, and I always have to be super careful. And I'll look at them a couple of times because it's $20 per card to get graded. And when you get a bunch of cards that are not very well, you're going to take a loss on all of them. And so I always have to step in with my own endowment effect and my own predispositions to say, okay, just because I own it, let's look at it from a totally neutral standpoint, or from a point that I don't own it. And somebody looking at this card, what would they say? So anyway, that's the endowment effect. Put the cards back. Next thing is using an example. Typically we talk about jellies. And this was the study that talked about different jellies for this particular topic. And I just like to change this to a more realistic, and most of my students are 21, so we just call it wine varieties, and makes it more interesting for me. But let's talk about wine here. If we go, we have two different treatments. One treatment saw 3 to 4 samples. 3 to 4 samples of wine. And then you had another group, and they saw 30 to 40 samples of wine. So my question is, here we go. Good excuse to bring up the whiteboard. Yeah. Which one attracted, out of these two, which one do you think attracted more interest from participants? Was more interesting, more entertaining? Now, especially, it's the same if we were talking about jellies, but this should be pretty easy if we were thinking about wine varieties. I mean, 30 to 40 samples, getting into that, I would be highly entertained, and I'd be highly interested in that process. And anybody knows of treatment number 2 in real life, let me know. I'll be there. So number 2 was definitely more interesting. But then the other question was, which one do you think attracted more buying or more purchases? Now, anybody who's been to a wine or bourbon tasting, You might argue with me on this one, because you might say, if I've had 30 to 40 different samples of wine or bourbon, I'm buying out the store. And I might not be able to argue with that. But overall, most people will actually they'll say the 3 or 4 samples wasn't as entertaining, but I actually have a pretty concrete buying decision based on 3 or 4. I like this one the best out of the 3 or 4. I'm going to go here. Once you've tried 30 or 40, you're just like, that was awesome and I feel great. Which one did you like the best? I don't know. And so you don't really buy anything or buy as much. So number 1 led to more purchases. Smaller sample made the decision-making process really straightforward, less complicated, and it led to more action. What is this called? Information overload. People become paralyzed when they are given too many options. So whether it's jelly or wine, they're given too many options. It leads to inaction, analysis paralysis. And so when we think about information overload from a financial standpoint, this can become very applicable. If you say, hey, just get into a mutual fund or an ETF. So you're going to learn, after we learn about exponential growth in this class, you're going to learn ETFs are where we want to be, low cost index ETFs. Say, okay, yeah, go do it. And you realize there are thousands of ETFs out there. And then you're trying to remember, okay, which one? Fultus, he was saying something about low expense ratios and fees and all this other stuff. And then is this the asset class? I don't know. And then you just go, well, I'll do this later. And so you just become totally overloaded. And there are so many different options. Even if we're looking for an S&P 500 index ETF, you could list probably 40 to 50 of these different ones. And if you show that list, like, I don't know which one to choose, even though they're more or less all the same. And this is our information overload. And this is the same thing when we talk about retirement funds or retirement decisions. You give this whole list of different of retirement investment options, and people are just starting a new job and they have to make this critical decision among 20 other huge decisions with their insurances and all these other things, and they're just filling out forms as fast as possible, and then they get this huge list of where you want to and where you should invest your funds, and you're expected to make this perfect decision, where most people look at that huge list and go, I'll do that later, and then many years later they realize they haven't saved anything for retirement. So this information overload is something that is very important from not just our standpoint, but if you're building retirement plans, that understanding 3 to 4 samples is going to get more action than 40 to 30 samples or 30 to 40 samples. And in fact, we get this threshold around 10 where we start seeing diminished participation in these retirement plans, which become very significant once we get past 20 options. So simpler is better when it comes to retirement plan designs, because it leads to more people actually filling out that form and participating in the retirement plan. All right, next topic we're going to talk about is called representativeness. And all these different fallacies and phenomenons and biases fall under this umbrella of representativeness. So I'll give you the textbook edition or the textbook definition of this. So it says, we judge probabilities by the degree to which A is representative of B. This is by the degree which A resembles B. That's the quote of the textbook. What I just like to say about this is we see patterns where they don't exist. We detect patterns where they're non-existent, but we think they're a pattern, even though they're more or less just random acts. These are randomness, but we're trying to detect patterns. And this is where we can now start getting into trouble and start making some bad decisions. All right, so this first one is a question for you. It says, Jim is a lottery winner. That's A. Jim is a lottery winner. Or B, Jim is a happy lottery winner. Jim is a lottery winner. Jim is a happy lottery winner. Which one do you think is more likely? Jim is a lottery winner. Happy lottery winner. So I want you to now think about when you're going through this, you go, okay, type 1 says this, but now that I know a little bit about these things, type 2 is going to step in and stop me. Okay. So what I'm hoping to hear is instinctually, you're going to go, yeah, type 1 says happy lottery winner. Everyone's got to be happy when they win the lottery. Type 2's got to come in and say, wait a minute, that's not true. Actually, A is more likely. Jim is a lottery winner is more likely than Jim is a happy lottery winner. Why? Because Jim could be a happy lottery winner, could be a miserable lottery winner, he could be an indifferent lottery winner. All these different descriptive words are going to be more probable with the blanket statement than it is making that specific statement where he's happy and a lottery winner. So this is called the conjunction fallacy. It's when we believe that some combination of events are more likely than one of the events. Happy lottery winner is more likely than lottery winner. So that's where we jump to. This is a misperception, but we want to detect it, and so we immediately say that's more likely. Here's another one for you. Around this, I'm going to ask you, give you about 15 seconds. I'm going to show you. All right. I'm going to ask you fill in as many words ending blank and blank in the next 20 seconds. Think about as many words as possible and go. Three, 2, 1, stop. So that is number of words ending blank and blank. All right, now I'm going to ask 20 more seconds. Come up with words ending ing. Ending ing in 20 seconds and go. Three, 2, 1, stop. How many of you got way more INGs than blank and blank? Most of you would. I know I would. Even when I look at it, it's like, I can think of many in my head. And when I wrote out blank and blank, I teach this stuff. I should know. But even then I was just like, oh man, my brain was just really grinding to try to come up with some of the words. But this conjunction fallacy, we would say, well, there are many more words. Our instincts say many more words and ing when we combine this combination than blank and blank. But when we take a step in and think about this cognitively, we go, wait a minute. That's not true. In fact, all blank and blank includes ing plus any other words. So let's see, fine, dine, that's blank and blank, plus any other words ing. This is the conjunction fallacy. So again, we believe a sum of combinations is more likely than one of the events. And now we have to begin the process of understanding what our type 1 does when it can be incorrect, and then when our type 2 has to step in and override this. Second one, it's one of my favorites. It's called the hot hand phenomenon. So it is believed that you should give the ball to the person with the hot hand. And the way they define a hot hand here is 2 or 3 makes in a row. Now, I'm going to ask if any athletes out there, when have you ever been in the zone? So think about what it means to be in the zone, whatever you define this as. So usually I get I have a bunch of athletes, and we're in the Big East. So a lot of the soccer, tennis, obviously basketball, baseball are all Big East, pretty decent, high-level D1 athletes that I get to teach about behavioral finance in my classes. And so we ask, okay, what does that feel like? What does that look like? So I can speak to basketball. That's what I was good at and known. And so I can think about being in the zone after playing hundreds, thousands of games, both, in high school, college, pro in Germany. But then you think about all the AAU games, all the rec games, and I can probably think of handful of times, 5 to 10 times, where I was just in the zone, probably scored 50 points, and just one after another. And I just remember it was almost like an out of body experience where you just weren't even thinking about what was actually happening. You're just doing what you've been trained to do for many thousands of hours, and you're just doing what you do. And so I was thinking about that, and I realized that when you're having those experiences, that's very rare. So like I said, out of all of those games and scrimmages and everything, maybe 5 to 10 times it was truly an in the zone kind of hot hand that I would have. But anyway, many people believe if we detect a trend, so if somebody has even 2 or 3 makes in a row, we believe that they're going to make the next one. So usually you see, okay, it's a heat check. We're going to take a questionable shot or run a questionable play that's very risky because we feel like we have the hot hand. And even coaches will say, hey, let's keep this person in. He's got the hot hand, and we're gonna ride it out. And typically what happens, unless you're having this real tail end experience, what usually happens if somebody is a 50% shooter, if you make 2 in a row, that third shot is still a 50% chance. There's no higher probability. So when you dig into the data, that's what we found, that there's no significantly different probability that there is, that it's higher because they have the hot hand, even though many of us believe this was going to be a trend. So we detect patterns where they don't exist. This is detecting a pattern, just as if I were to say, hey, I flipped 2 heads in a row. I'm on fire. I'm going to flip another head. We go, well, no, it's 50%, right? That's the point. But that's our type 2 that has to step in and say, wait a minute. All right, this is all random. It's not a pattern. We're detecting a pattern where it's not existent. And but we see that in sports, and anytime somebody makes 2 or 3 in a row, we go, oh, that's the hot hand. Look out. Let them shoot wherever. And that's not really the case, because if you're a 20% shooter, you make 2 in a row, that third one is still going to be a 20% chance that they're going to make that one. So hot hand phenomenon is more of this trend following. Yeah. So you follow the trend and you make 2 in a row, you're going to believe that you're going to make that third and fourth and fifth. That's our momentum. Now we also have what is called the gambler's fallacy. This is let's just spell it out for you here. Gambler's fallacy. We mistakenly detect a streak and believe the opposite will happen once we detect that streak. So we have this that's similar to the hot hand. We detect the streak, but then we believe the opposite is going to happen. The opposite result will happen. Think about baseball. Anybody playing baseball, you're in a slump, so you haven't had a hit for a few at-bats. What does everybody say? Well, you're due. You're due for a hit. Come on, baby, you're due. You're due. You're going to reverse it. That's the gambler's fallacy. The gambler's fallacy came from Bellagio, or the casinos, because it was noticed that on the roulette tables, so you have 36 spots on the roulette table, 17 are black, 17 are red, and 2, I believe, are for the dealer. And what we observed is anytime there were a number of blacks in a row, so the last 7 were blacks, where was all the money? So if you're a hot hand follower, you'd say, well, black is hot. We're going to put it on black. But the gambler's fallacy that we see in other behaviors is all the money was on red. Why was it on red? We ask people. Well, because it's due. It's been so overdue. All these blacks rolling the black on here, that we get black in a row, then all of them, where it just creates this perfect storm where it's totally overdue for a red. All the money's on the red. So that's type 1 thinking. Type 1 is we detect that trend and we believe the opposite is going to happen. Type 2 has to step in and say, wait a minute, if we're truly spinning this correctly, the real probability every single time, no matter what's happened in the past, every time there is a 17 out of 36 chance that it's going to be black. There's a 17 of 36 chance it's going to be red. And there's a 2 of 36 chance it'll be dealer. So again, this is our gambler's fallacy that we see. Continuing on, we've got recency bias, which I've already mentioned in the previous one. It says recent evidence is more compelling. So I'll go back to that example saying where in Florida you're from. If you're from Punta Gorda, you're going to say we always get hit with a hurricane. And if you're just north, Bradenton, Sarasota, Tampa, St. Pete area, we never get hit by a hurricane. And that's simply based off of what's recently happened with those hurricanes. We also have another word. It's called salience. So salience is dramatic evidence is more compelling. So salience, what is more salient? Think about headlines. I haven't checked the market. I think it was pretty flat or down today. But let's just say Dow Jones is down 1%. So Dow Jones down 1%. And now I'm just so curious. I just saw a squirrel here. Okay. Down 1%. It's not. It's very flat today. Down 1%. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But what we could say is even down, let's say 1.5%. 1.5%. Oh, okay. Okay. Here's the headline. We're down today. But I can take that same information and realize that the Dow is at 33,000 as we're taping this. So if it's down 1.5%, 1% would be 330. Have that again. Let's go 465. That's how many points it would be down. That's 1.5%. My math is correct. The Dow down 465. But now again, we've talked about framing here, and I've got it in red. So, bloodbath here. But now And so, of course, the bigger number is going to be more compelling. That's more salient. But now I'm going to, what do we say here? Does it plummet? Or I like plummet. I was thinking tumble, but I can go plummet. Plummets. 465 points. What do you think people are going to read more, are going to be more compelled to click on? Well, the more salient one here, the plummets, and we're going to use higher numbers now with our framing issues. That is salience. Next is something called the availability bias. So availability bias means freely available, easy to process information is more compelling. Easy and available information is more compelling. So we've got an estimate of how many people per year do you think in, I forget, it was 2011, died from shark attacks. How many people would you estimate died of shark attacks? And then the other estimate is how many people died of coconuts or coconut related fatalities. Oh, getting basically hit on the head with a coconut. According to the numbers, shark attacks, coconuts were 10 times more likely to kill you than shark attacks. When we look at the whole worldwide numbers, coconuts were 10 times as likely. But what were you like everybody else? Did we estimate that shark attacks were way more deadly than coconuts? Okay, let's think why. Well, here's an example. When we talk about availability bias, what have we always read about? Or what did we see in the news? If you're from down south, it seemed like there was always an attack, something on the near shore, or shark seen near the shores. When we were living in St. Augustine for about 6 years, we would see that on the news. Never once have I heard on the news, man gets hit in the head by a coconut, dies. So when we think about it, when we make our decision here, our minds are going, yeah, I'm going to estimate shark attacks high, coconuts low. I have no reason to believe otherwise. But then the proof comes out and says, no, it's actually the opposite. We just don't hear about the coconut attacks or coconut falling on somebody's head. In the world of finance, what we see is any stock that is included on the S&P 500 list now becomes more available to other individuals through the actual list itself, and also through ETFs, where just the inclusion doesn't change their business or their profits or their sales. All else equal, that inclusion of the stock on the S&P 500 increases annual returns by approximately 3.5 to 3.6% per year. And so this is just being on people's radar is actually going to increase the value of a stock. Next, we've got what is called the anchoring and adjustment. So this is where we anchor our estimates to an arbitrary number, and we fail to adjust to appropriately estimate. So the arbitrary number can be set out in a number of different ways, but what I always like to do is I'll ask the students, say, okay, do you believe that the S&P 500 is going to close higher or lower than 2000? Do you believe the S&P 500 will close higher or lower than 2000? And I've got a bunch of majority of finance majors in my class. And so they go, S&P 500, that sounds a bit low. It's going to be higher. So S&P higher than 2000. And you go, okay, please estimate what you believe the S&P 500 is going to be at the end of the year. And they'll say, okay, well, it's May, June right now. I think it might go up another 5 or 10%. And so my anchor is at 2,000, 5 or 10% is going to be, I'm feeling good. It's going to be 2,200. So I estimate 2,200, and you get a whole list. And so you compare this group, and then I give the other group the actual S&P 500 and say, do you believe the S&P 500 right now is at 4160 something? So 4160. You think it's going to be higher or lower? And then we get a whole different, some people say higher, some people say lower. But on average, even if it's a negative trend, it could be 3,900 or 4,000. But the average estimates are nearly double each other. So one's gravitating upwards because there's a tendency to think, no, I think that's a bit low, or they know it's a bit lower. But overall, that number is going to be almost a half of the estimates given. And you go, it's the same group of individuals. They're all about the same, all finance majors. So why would we get such different responses? And it's the anchor. It's the anchor that we set and just say 2,000. And the automatic thinking just goes, I'm not going to even investigate. I guess it's just around 2,000 because they say so. And then I'll make my adjustment higher. But it's not nearly enough most of the time. So something to be careful about. Somebody sets an anchor that we fail to adjust. Sometimes we're going to see this in the real estate market. So based on the anchoring price that people fail to adjust can influence appraisers and influence home buyers as well. But I'm going to save that ammunition for later. And then we're actually going to stop here because I'm going to go on a large tangent on my near and dear to my heart with a lot of implication, exponential growth bias. This has a lot of implications, and we're going to talk about that later. Refrain from doing that. If you have any questions, friends, please let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear from you. If you want to contact me directly, you can hit me up at brianfultus.com and find me on my website. If you're looking to book me for speaking or teaching engagements, I am your guy to speak about all things personal finance or behavioral finance. Those two kind of go hand in hand. And if you think I get fired up just sitting here in my little home office talking to my computer screen, just get me on a stage, man. Oh, man, we'll get you fired up and teach you a thing or two. That's my hope, at least. And if you want, I'm also on Instagram. Find me there. We have fun, and I'm accessible. You can reach me there, and let me know what you're interested in or what you're learning and questions that you might have. I'm always happy to engage with you there. So thanks again, everybody, for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time when we continue our conversation on biases and heuristics. We'll talk to you later. Bye.